little too loud. Maybe we could turn it down. Is that possible? Thank you. So welcome to the library, and thank you for coming tonight for Ask the Ornithologist with Brian Harris. Tonight's speaker may be familiar to many of you. Brian Harris is the Town of Wayland's Conservation Commission land manager. Previously, he worked at the Rachel Carson and Monomoy National Wildlife Refuges, and has additional experience doing field work and research in Florida and Rhode Island. Most pertinent to this evening, Brian has a strong reputation as a local birder. He graduated from Wayland High School in 2000 and earned a degree in environmental science from Castleton State College in Vermont. So thank you again for coming tonight, and please join me in welcoming Brian.
Oop, working?
Goes to sleep sometimes.
Does that work? There we go. Y'all can hear me? There we go. That's better. So we'll just keep it really informal, and I'm going to talk a little about birding in Wayland, and I'm going to answer some of the commonly asked questions I get from beginners and even advanced birders, things that come up often. So, as if any time you have questions, just feel free to stop and, ask. So one of the first questions I get a lot, especially working for the town and working for the conservation department, is everyone wants to know where to see birds in Wayland. So I picked some of the places, where I go, where you're probably going to see the greatest diversity and greatest number of species and individuals at any given time. And that's a lot more grainy than I thought it would be, but they all have individual slides anyways. But that's Sedge Meadow. For those of you who were on my walk a couple of weeks ago, that's Cow Common. That's Herd Farm, isn't it? Oh, sorry, that's Cow Common. That's Sedge Meadow, the two entrances. That's Washbrook. And that's Herd Farm. So it'll make sense as we go along. So if you want to see them, these pictures were all taken by me too. Just shameless plug. If you want to see the most amount of birds and the greatest diversity, I always tell everyone to go to Herd Farm. It's located off Pelham Island Road on Herd Road at the end. If you go all the way to the end, it's a dead end. You can't miss it. And obviously a lot of the times people would rather be at the coast during the spring and fall because, you get more migrants there, which I could go into later. But, if you have a couple hours like I do before work, or like I said, you really want to bird the Sudbury River Valley or the town, definitely go to Herd's Farm. It has the greatest variety of habitat. As you can see at the bottom, this is just me personally since I started birding there my senior year of high school, senior year of high school. I've had 200 species of birds there, which is, I think that's really good for being a non-coastal habitat. And it's also really scenic, really nice. The trail system itself is about 3.9 miles. It's a pretty easy walk. You're going to get wet this time of the year, and then again in fall and winter, but during the spring and summer, it usually dries up pretty quickly. All the trails we have around town are pretty self-guided. It's pretty hard to get lost there, and all the trails eventually end up back in the parking lot for the most part. So. Cow Common's another place I started birding when I got my license back in like 98, 99. Pretty similar to herds, but it's got more grasslands. It's a little bit smaller area-wise. Again, as you can see, I had 186 species of birds on the property. If you go there in fall, that's probably the best time to be there, where the community gardens, if any of you have been over there, have a plot there. The weedy fields that get left later on with all the seeds it puts up a lot of sparrows. I think I've had maybe, I don't know off the top of my head, I've had a lot of different species there, including some ones that are real tough to see anywhere away from the coast. So sparrows can be quite a challenge in the fall, but it's worth it. And again, any time of the year, you never know what you're going to see there. I've had some pretty exceptional birds there. Before they built the Wayland Common, back at the Raytheon, I had a bird called the American Golden Plover there once. It's just about this time of the year. It was late April, and I think to the best of my knowledge, That's still the only inland record for New England in spring. You're not going to see that every time, but just shows that the kind of potential that has if you bird there often enough. For those of us that were with me on my walk, this is where it was. I led a woodcock walk a couple weeks ago. If you were there recently, I don't know if any of you have been there. I've started putting up bluebird houses, and I made a few makeshift platform bird feeders. So it's nice to have some birds to draw them right in. Question? Pretty much everybody here is probably driven by this thousands of times if you're from Wayland, Sudbury, or Weston. It's right off Route 20 next to Russell's. It's the old train tracks. Just started birding there, as you can see. These are all my numbers back in 2013. It lacks the habitat diversity of some of the other places I mentioned earlier. Like you can see, it's pretty much a continuous wetland system. And it's not maintained by anything, so towards the end there you can almost see it's not very well maintained, except when is it Eversource? That Eversource comes out there every once in a while and clears it for me, which is unintentionally nice, makes the walking easier. Yes. Yeah, I started saying this. You can kind of see it here. This is the old railroad tracks, and it goes all the way to Landham Road if you want to walk all the way through. And like I said, Eversource, that owns the power lines, will occasionally, for whatever reason, I don't know, they will come out and clear it. But if you go to Russell's, y'all know where Russell's greenhouse is? I try to get as far away as you can just so you don't interfere with their business. But I've never had anybody say anything to me, and I've run into many people that work there. And the parking lot would be kind of like right here where my hand is, in proportion to the railroad tracks, and you literally just walk up a small hill that's probably this high, and it puts you pretty much right here. And then you can just go as far or as little or as long as you want. There's no loop, obviously, it's just a straightaway. And if you want to see wetland birds, waterfowl, and some of the more secretive marsh birds like rails and there's a pair of ospreys that started nesting down there within the last 5-6 years. Up on the utility wire. I don't know if you can see them. It would be just past the last one you can see in the picture here. It's best at early morning. It's one of the spots. If you go to herds or the gardens, there's more bird life there more continuously through the day. I found that this place gets real quiet real quick. So you kind of got to be there really, really early. One of the other features of this place is there's a massive robin roost in fall and winter. Heard of it, but I had 15,000, 20,000 birds come in at dusk. So it's pretty neat to see anything in mass like that. It's cold out there in winter, but it's worth it. Sedge Meadow is another conservation property that I maintain, and we do. Just started birding, as you can see, 2015, pretty recently. It's got a lot of potential. It kind of superficially reminds me of a smaller version of Herd's Farm habitat, and it's got, like I said, it's got a lot of potential. I just started birding there. I should bird there a lot more than I do, and I've really started birding there this year quite actively. I guess the one biggest difference that keeps me from going there as often is there's no direct access to the water. Kind of, you struggle to get as much diversity in species numbers of individuals as you would. How common and Washbrook, that all have easy access to the water pretty much at all times. But that anything that shows up for the most part to the other first three places should show up here as well. Yeah, what was the first question? The parking, if we go back, there's one spot here that's, you can kind of see the little P. And that's Maine. The parking lot itself is run by Sudbury Valley trustees. That's on Gleason Lane. And then if you go up to Sedge Meadow Road, there's kind of a, I guess in theory I should put something up there. There used to be a chain link fence there a long time ago, and there's 2 posts. I can't remember the exact that it's across from, but there's another access point there. And then there's also the water department fields, which are further up north, and the trail system who asked about. you can pick the trail system up pretty much anywhere there, at any one of the access points, and you can kind of see the light brown. It doesn't show up super well on this, but it kind of goes all the way around the fields, through a little red maple swamp to the water department fields off Moore Road, and all the way to the back. It does not make a loop like Herds or Cow Common, but yes.
So there's no trail down to the water?
Not at Sedge Meadow, no. In winter, if you really want to get ambitious, you can walk across the Fish and Wildlife property, which owns the back ends of it. You get a look at the river, but it's most of the time it's pretty obscured. It's an obscured view, but you can theoretically get there, but not from the property proper. But I mean, again, you never know. Like I said, I haven't birded there too much. There's no reason. Oh. Yeah, it's all. Not that I can't do it. It's all up on our town website, the actual address too, if you ever needed that. But it's like, I think it'd be like right here somewhere. I kind of just indiscriminately put the star there. Right, I was saying there's another one. That other one across from, what is that? Right. It's also not maintained by the town, so if there is snow or it's heavy rains, it is pretty inaccessible, the Black Cat Farm entrance. But we this winter actually, we came in with 2 yards of fill, and we filled in all the potholes and tried to even it out. It's better, but I'm sure over time that, progression of things, it'll erode. Yeah, that's black. That should be. It looks like it might have moved a little bit when I blew the map up, but it should be like roughly like right there where that. Right. Well, when you go down to, yeah, I should have put more pictures. It's obvious if you know the Black Cat Farm Trail that's on Gleason right as you come up is pretty obvious because there's a big drop, and then there's a sign, and the trail system kind of all. It's just like it doesn't loop around, but you have to go down. You come all the way back. The other ones, like I said, that's right across from North Cemetery. And then the community gardens would be right there. And then the Herd Farm, which is just at the end of Herds Road off Pelham Island Road. And again, as I said at the beginning, that dead end, so you have nowhere else to go, and you'll see a kiosk and a big sign. And there's always a load of people there. It's a very high traffic area, high visibility area for our department. So, I mean, that one's almost impossible to miss because it gets so much use, especially by the dog walking community, which is a little tough, but it's something work in progress for our department. We're trying. Just a quick, touch on some of the lesser known birds you might see. Others, but these are a few that I chose. The top right here, this is the warbling vireo. Pretty common bird of the rivers around the Sudbury River Valley. Another month from now, anywhere you go, let's see, let's say this. Yeah, but another 3 to 4 weeks, anywhere you go, you'll start hearing them. Take off around mid-August anywhere else in the state, but there's such a high density of them here in Wayland that I've had them as late as like the 20th of September. It's one of those birds you don't see, but you've probably all heard it if you've ever been out near the river anywhere around the Sudbury River Valley. Sure. Yeah, if it was a little sharper, it's actually its own family. They eat only insects. And some of the other vireo family will actually will eat fruit occasionally, but almost entirely insects. That's why, like a lot of the spring migrants, they time their arrival to be here. When it's warmer, when there are plentiful insects for them to feed on. But their song's really nice. It's again, it's something that you've probably heard and just passed it off in the background before. This is called the winter wren, bird that's more common in the far north. They're famous for their song. And for whatever reason in Wayland, they seem to be they're pretty hardy around here. And if you go to the upper Millbrook conservation areas, even in the dead of winter, it always seems to hold a couple of them. It's really nice to see anything other than chickadees, titmice, cardinals, jays in the dead of winter. And I don't know what it is about that habitat at lower Millbrook and upper Millbrook. There's always a couple of them, no matter how brutal the winter is, that make it. And if you ever get a chance to hear their song, which I could do later, it's everybody's favorite. It's kind of like a piccolo or a flute. It doesn't sound like it should be coming out of something that's only like that big. What else do we have? Nothing. I just realized they're all pretty bland. But this is called a northern rough-winged swallow. I just had my first one a couple of weeks ago, and they do nest around town, but the real allure of them is if you go to Herd Pond August through early October, you can get hundreds of them, even though typically, like the warbling vireos, they're usually gone around, early to mid-August, but I've had them linger even into early November before, exceptionally. It's a real treat to see them around here. Even when you see them during the breeding season, which is, they're starting to nest right now. They nest in, I don't know where I guess they nested in riverbanks historically, but I've never seen them use anything but pipes. Believe it or not, there used to be a pair in the old Whole Foods. That was the most accessible one, right in the back along Pelham Island Road. There were a couple pairs in there, and the pipes that were sticking out. But it's, at least for me, it's rare to ever see more than 2 or 3 in a day. But like I said, they, mid to late August, or then again in September, they peak out. There can be hundreds of them at Herd's Farm. Right at dusk, right before dusk, they start to stage up for the night and swirl around, and then eventually has night to roost for the evening. But it's pretty cool. Like I said, you only see 4 or 5 usually to see 200. This is an alder flycatcher. Just recently, within the last couple of years, they started nesting at Washbrook, which you remember is the property around Russell's, down the train tracks there. They're still pretty rare in Worcester County, so it's kind of neat to have one here in town. I can't think of anywhere else locally they nest, although I'm sure they go underreported because unless they're calling, there's another bird that's super abundant in Wayland that's identical to them called a willow flycatcher. And they're pretty omnipresent around wetlands in Wayland during the spring and summer. Unless you hear them singing, you can't tell them apart. So it's a real treat to have. At Washbrook, it's a treat to have one there. Like I said, there's 15, 20 pairs of willows and maybe 2 pairs of them. But and call is the hard part. And yeah, you got to be really lucky. I just happen to know where they were typically have material in its mouth calling. So that's the only way. Which again looks identical, but they do sound totally different. Slide, yeah. Just a couple quick questions. Certain things that people always ask me when I was brainstorming about things to talk about tonight. This is one I get all the time, whether I'm doing outbirding on my own or I'm hosting events like this. Why are there no bird feeders? And I picked this one because it's really nicely landscaped. I'm sure they mean well, but at least in my opinion, there's some fatal flaws to this, which is why they're probably not getting any birds. First, just 2 quick things. A lot of the birds that you see and want to attract to your backyard need dense cover or need to be close to the tree line. There's a lot of birds like your sparrows and even the northern cardinals that you're all familiar with that would much rather have it be close to the tree line. There's a lot of Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks to a lesser degree that stalk a lot of your backyard feeders, and a lot of the birds need the cover to dive into. So a lot of those birds, especially the sparrows more so, aren't going to come way out into the middle of somebody's yard. It's just a little too far away. I would have put it over here, right at the edge. Oh, you also want it far enough away that cats can't get at them, but not far enough away that, the birds that prefer cover aren't going to come out and visit them. What else was I going to say? That's probably too many. I don't know where this person lives. Like I said, I just randomly grabbed it off the internet, but that's probably too many feeders for that area. If you're around here, for example, at the feeding stations I have set up at the conservation lands, this is just get monopolized by house sparrows and grackles and red-winged blackbirds and common grackles. I try to spread out the feeders so they can't monopolize all of them at once. Another pet peeve of mine to be, you should put water by the feeding station because I've actually had birds get pretty sick. You can spread disease that way. I can't back that up with anything I know for scientific fact, but typically you want to put it, again, somewhere towards just like the feeders near some shrubbery, but not out in not underneath your feeders so they can contaminate.
Like pooping into the water?
Right. I mean, they have good intentions. It's a nice yard, but I would put this over here and then the feeding station somewhere well away from it. The other problems are just sometimes patience. It depends where you live. I mean, obviously, typically chickadees and titmice and nuthatches are going to find your feeder first. But sometimes it takes a little while, especially depending on where you live. Around here, we have enough, backyard birds that they'll probably find in a few days. But it's kind of, you live in a, but we don't have that problem here. I thought the only other thing I would do too was there's no thistle feeders here. They look like they're all seed. This also looks like it's got millet in it, which is kind of the cheaper blends that you see offered at grocery stores, which doesn't really have a lot of sustenance and usually just attracts house sparrows. The thistle is good for, usually comes in a special tube feeder with a small hole if you've never seen them, and then that'll attract goldfinches in summer and then certain other birds in winter if they're around. Thistle's a safe one to feed because the grackles and house sparrows, typically red wings don't eat it, jays won't. Chickadees will eat it every once in a while, house finches. And then if you're lucky in the winter, if we get some winter finches that come from the far, far north, they'll eat thistle. But squirrel thistle, I've never had them eat it. Especially if goldfinches starting to come back from, they're permanent residents here, but they do migrate to some level.
They sort of regionally migrate. I always wondered where they went from here, close to the river. It seems like this would be, maybe they go closer to the sea, maybe it's a little warmer.
Well, there's two things. Goldfinches will migrate depending on the food availability, and also, I don't know how many of you have seen them. They do change colors in winter. They go from fluorescent yellow to a muted drab gray-brown. Another feeder tip I'd give all y'all, these look like the store-bought cakes you can buy. They come in a plastic package. I go to the butcher or the grocery store and I get the actual beef fat. It's a lot cheaper too, and it usually only lasts like a day or two in the winter at my feeding stations around town. I mean, they'll eat anything in winter because they're usually pretty hard up, but they really enjoy the beef fat. You're going to get a lot more. I've seen everything actually eat that. Well, not everything will go to the store, company bought bricks that they've seen. But it's also much cheaper. Yeah.
The right end of that grate right there would be owned by my gray squirrels. They would just own that area.
Yeah, that's my next slide, I think, right? Squirrel proofing. It's almost impossible to find anything that'll stop them. This is the model I prefer because it's hollow underneath, and there's usually a big bolt or lug nut that sits on top of that. So they can get underneath it, but they can't get over it, and they can't push it up to get up to the feeders. It's the only drawback with that is it's pretty expensive. I think the one I bought that used to be at my parents' and is now at the community gardens in Wayland, I think it was like $100-something or more. Yeah, I couldn't find a big enough one of the whole thing, of the whole unit. But what it is, this is a pole, this is a baffle, right? Like this is a pipe, and you put the pole through it, and the metal pole would come out right here. And then there's a big bolt or lug nut that goes on top of that, and they can't push it up and they're obviously too small, nor do they have the power to climb up it, because they're like. This just goes on the pole.
It's
Like
just a stopper. It's a bearing.
a baffle, right? Like it would sit. Well, obviously it's circular, but it would sit here, and it locks in, and they can't go. There's no way they can get over it. And that's the only thing I found out that works. They have the ones where they spin, and they have the ones where the weight closes on it, but. Does it really? Oh, good. That wasn't around when I used to have backyard feed at my parents' house here in town. I figured if they're hungry, they'll eat anything, or they'll figure out a way to eat around it. Sure.
I put out the big roll horizontally mounted on an easily accessible feeder for the squirrels. I looked out there. I figured I was getting Mexican squirrels.
I'm sure. I'm not. Be interesting to see which one all y'all have in your backyards. But this is actually the gray squirrel you see, but it's melanistic, means it has no pigment, so it appears black. But it's the same ones you guys get in your backyards. And this is a red squirrel. They're more aggressive, but they're smaller. They're a little less common, but you should get both of them in your backyards, I'd imagine. This was actually, both of these were taken in Wayland. For whatever reason, there's a genetic mutation, and you see a lot of the black ones around here. It's kind of neat. Right, yeah. Yeah, that's true in general. Here we get both mixed forests, so you kind of see them. I mean, I still see more grays than reds, but it definitely depends what properties you're at and where you are. This is probably the other third question I get probably the most when I'm asked, again, when I'm birding, or what happens to the hummingbirds? When should you take down your feeders? And fact of the matter is we only get one hummingbird in the Northeast regularly that nests. That's the familiar ruby throat, which is actually this one. It's either a young bird or a female. I can't tell. But they will move. I don't know how many you feed the hummingbirds. They take off when it's time. It doesn't matter how long you feed. It's more weather-based and time-based. When it's time for them to go, they go. It's more the other birds that are called vagrants from other parts of the country that get displaced here that really need your feeders, and then that's kind of they either make it or they don't. But this is a rufous hummingbird I took out in California. That's a Costas hummingbird I took in one of my trips to the desert Southwest. The best time or the best place? The best time to look out for. I saw somebody had one recently online already, but there was no pictures, so it's always questionable. But usually by the last few days in April, I start seeing my first ones if I'm real vigilant, depending on the severity of the spring. And then certainly by around the 5th to the 15th is when they become pretty common. And they do nest locally, so they're the only hummingbird you're seeing in your yards year-round. That picture on the far left of the this is the ruby-throated hummingbird. The community gardens in Wayland, open to the public, you can walk, which is part of the Cow Common complex. They're super there in another couple weeks. Especially in the fall, you can actually get some decent numbers of them. People put up hummingbird feeders, and they feed on the flowers on their way southbound. So it's a really good, really good spot to see them. Again, they're the only hummingbird we get. If you see any hummingbird after probably the last few days in September, it's probably something exceptionally rare that should be documented with a photo or video, if at all possible. Yeah, I mean, later on in the winter when they get cold and they get displaced from other parts of the country, they'll pretty much hang to your feeder all day and feed continuously because they have to survive. So it's a lot easier to see them in the winter if you're lucky. But invariably, somewhere in Mass, non-birders or people who aren't real hardcore birders will say, I still have a hummingbird. They take a picture, send it to any various numbers of birding forums around town or around the state, rather, or local ornithologists, and it'll end up being something from the desert Southwest that gets lost during its during migration time. Guess that's the last one. If there's anything else y'all want me to touch on, like I said, feel free to. Sure. Good question. There is one at Sedge Meadow. Again, that's this property here. If you park at the Black Cat Farm parking lot and you go straight out, the park, it'd be easier if I had a picture. I apologize. Like if you're standing in the parking lot and you look straight out, cleared all the invasive plants from, and you can see a big wood platform feeder that's probably maybe a little bit bigger than the podium here I'm leaning against. It's a good chance to get some good looks at some of the more common birds. I think a couple weeks ago, the feeder at Sedge Meadow that I'm talking about now had 4 fox sparrows under it, which is kind of nice. Usually they're pretty skittish and reclusive, but that was the point of the feeding stations for people, who are interested in birds and nature. Is just they will come right out in the open and hop around underneath the feeders. Like the usual sparrows you're used to seeing, they're like maybe a little smaller than a cardinal, and they're bright red, reddish brown. They're really pretty. Yeah. Though they're so big that they can't get around it. It's just they're pretty makeshift. I'm not a carpenter, but the platforms are probably like that big. So the squirrels can't physically get. They're too small. They can't get up and over it to reach on anything. You could do that too. It's been costing me a lot of money to keep them filled this winter because it was a little warmer and some of the blackbirds lingered, but it was fun. A lot of the people who've been out there I've ran into said they've liked seeing the birds. So. Good question. Job Lot sells 50-pound bags for $20. Black oil. That's a good deal. Some of the other places around 50 pounds is like $40 or $50. So, any of the other mixes, if you put that much feed at one time, there's usually enough for everybody. That the chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, woodpeckers will all feed along with the blackbirds and jays who tend to monopolize probably your feeding stations. That's the other thing about, where was that slide? Don't put them all together here. When I, used to live in Wayland and even at some of the properties, that's why I have 3 or 4 or 5 of them on a property and put them all around the yard. That way if the jays or grackles and red-winged blackbirds congregate around one, typically they don't get all of them. Some of my feeders that are set back in the woods a little more, the red-winged blackbirds and grackles are less inclined to go to, while the chickadees and nuthatches and smaller birds will use them. So that was a good question. If you've never been to Sedge Meadow, like I said, it'd be obvious if you were there and you just go straight out. It's hard to explain without a picture, but you'd see it. I just filled it yesterday, and there were today, when I was mowing for the first time this year, and there were a ton of blue jays and there are chickadees and cardinals around. So the birds will probably give it away too. We have a big flock of like 30 or 40 jays there. They'll find it for you. They're pretty raucous. Sure. Yeah, like a lot of the spring migrants, which hummingbirds are one of, they're in a pretty quick hurry to get out of here. I'm sure that they'll use the new orchard at Hurd's Farm. If any of you have been there and seen it, we planted some new apple trees to replace the ones that were destroyed in last March's blizzards. A lot of times with hummingbirds, it's, regardless of your skill set while you're birding, it's just looking in the right place, right time. Especially now, as like I said, they're trying to go north. They might stop for a second and then they're take off up and they're gone. I'm sure they use it, but I don't think that's any more or less reliable than anywhere else around town that has flowers that, in another couple weeks to see them. And if you put out your hummingbird feeders, like I said, they should be here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. You've just as good a chance to see them in your backyards, even if, just at your flower gardens if you have one. Fluid has to come red. You got to be really careful about making your own mixes and putting your own dyes in it. In theory, the companies that do it put the right chemicals in it, so that's not going to harm them. I know some people have inadvertently killed them if you put your own sugar mix in there, because the stuff they make for companies is specified for their, obviously their digestive systems. Like I said, they only weigh a couple, they're so small anyways, it doesn't take much to probably throw their system off. Yeah, I don't know what the chemical. I've never bothered to look what the actual chemical compounds are in the dyes in the sugar water that they sell at Drumlin Farm or at Russell's. But I know that you're not supposed to make your own. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Oh, yeah, that's another question I get too. Well, they do have the mixtures that I've used that give you the directions. Yeah, that's true. Um, there you go. I mean, again, I'm not. I don't have a horse in the race. I don't work for any of the companies like Droll Yankee or Katie or what are some of the others, Audubon. But I've just been told that they can get sick off of it. The other question too is you're probably not seeing the same hummingbirds all year. I mean, during the fall, I'll be like, people are seeing the same ones. Not that you're killing them for sure, but it is just a common question saying like, oh, I have the same one all fall. And it's like you're probably seeing some places in Maine, even up at my parents' house, I'm probably seeing 15 or 20 different ones a day. Right. Yeah, sure. Especially in the summer when they get territorial and they are nesting, June, July, you're probably seeing the same ones. But after that, it's probably augmented by a huge number of southbound birds. John, do you have a question? Yeah, I mean, just another thing you can do is try putting them in different parts of your yard. That works too. They can be pretty territorial, so there's a chance that if you have one, they'll just the one male will monopolize the feeder. Yeah. Hummingbirds are pretty tolerant of human disturbance, believe it or not. So if you put them up by your window with your hanging plants or anything like that, they'll come right in. Yeah, it is. If you ever get a chance to go out to the Southwest, it's amazing that we only get, like I said, one species, and you can get 10, 12 in a day. If you've ever got a chance to go to Southeast Arizona in late spring, summer, it's like the way we see, goldfinches or house sparrows at your feeder. It's just constant. Yeah, like the way. It's pretty incredible. The best luck I've ever had when I've lived in Wayland with my parents and even up at my parents' house now is coincidentally this one right here. It's called bee balm or monarda. I don't know what it's the same Latin name and the common name for it, and they're That's actually what that bird was doing in that photo, which I think the more I look at it is probably a young bird, but I mean, it was there for like a half an hour, 45 minutes, just sitting on the bee bombs in the back. Yep. What's another one I've seen them use? Is what's columbine or the creeper. Anything that's red, generally, they'll be attracted to. That's kind of the key. The name of it, it's I want to say wisteria. That's not right. I can't. Whatever. But yeah, right, anything that's got tubular and it's red to draw them in, they're really attracted to the red color. You actually see that's what this Costas hummingbird is feeding on in Tucson. Although I don't know what flower that is, but same idea. Yeah, I've seen them use all the colors of the flowers, but they do prefer the red. This. Yeah, and again, just be vigilant. It's the best. They find your feeding station too, though. Feeding station too, they tend to stay pretty close to it during the springs, and once you have them there permanently. Of there's like I said at the gardens, the community gardens in Wayland, which again is part of Cow Common. There's so many people in there who have hummingbird feeders. There's so many flowers that I've never thought to do it, but I guess in theory, to put a few more up around town. It doesn't take that much work. Well, it'd be easier to have it near a water source to, like John said, to really maintain it and keep it clean. My parents, I know that I make sure that they clean theirs every couple days. Design. I'm just about anything. I mean, I've never seen one get caught, but you can go online and I've seen them be eaten by, praying mantis, spiders, like and not big tarantulas like you think down in the Southwest, like little quarter-sized spiders. Just hit the web and that's it. They're so. If you've ever had one in your hand, you've seen them. They're really they're so frail that it doesn't take much for them to get entangled by it. So yeah, I mean, just about anything will take them. I figure a lot of predators probably don't because they're so small. But yeah. Yeah, just keep her. I put your feeders out now. Yep, go ahead. Jump. Yeah, can't emphasize that enough. If you're going to go there and you want to try to see birds, that's the easiest. Not only is there, like I said, greatest diversity and highest number of individuals, but that's the easiest place to see them. A couple months, like the bobolinks will be here in a couple weeks. I don't know if any of you know what they are. They're a grassland bird. They're black and yellow. Kind of resemble a more colorful red-winged blackbird, same family. And they're all over those fields. That's a real popular, easy, nice visual that people like. Yes. I do. I can get them on my phone. Yeah, I said I'd play the winter wren. I should certainly play that one. But, yeah, this is the time of the year, too, where at least I'll spend a couple, 2 or 3 hours before work. I try to be out there by around 4:35, and I'll be at herds most days, or I'll be somewhere for sure. Oh. I had full bars a couple minutes ago before I. Do you have Wi-Fi in here? Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Sometimes they'll go even longer than that. Everyone get a chance to hear that? Yeah, it's this one right here. Like I said, they're smaller than the chickadees at your feeder by quite a bit, maybe just a little bit, about halfway between the chickadees and the hummingbirds. And a lot of the times I'll be walking somewhere this time of the year, and even in the dead of winter, and you'll hear that. Almost, I don't think I've ever seen one in a tree. They're all, they creep around the ground in logs and along the river. You'll just hear it nowhere. And it's a real booming song, too. It's something that it's called a warbling vireo. Vireo, V-I-R-E-O. Yep. This is a northern rough-winged swallow. And again, the other one on the bottom left, not something that people will probably see unless you go looking for it at Washbrook, but that's a flycatcher. Unique to the area, like I said. Warbling vireos have a nice song, too. The other birds have kind of a muted... the swallows don't even have a song, but the little flycatcher does, but it's a really quick kind of indescript noise. They'd really have to... Sounds like it's a little tricky. Most of the winter wrens you see around here are just migrants. They're heading up to the north woods where they nest in stream sides or anywhere where there's running water. If you go up to even Worcester, I was up in Ashburnham this weekend, and I might have had 6 or 7 of them on my walk just singing. But like I said, you never see them. But that's the warbling vireo. Yeah, like I said, what is this again, like the 17th? Yeah, another 3, 4 weeks now, if you walk anywhere, I can think they nest all over town, anywhere by the rivers. Sometimes in some pretty deep, about has 5, 6, maybe 7 pairs along that whole stretch. They can be real common. It's nice. Like it's a really nice. When I need one, I'll just hope that I have internet service, and I go to the Cornell website, whichever that one is. Is that Merlin? Okay. They'll give you they'll give them you for free, but then you have to keep queuing it to play back if you're trying to use it to call something in. But I think that's what everyone uses. I would suggest that. Is it? Okay. Yeah, that was good too. Anything that, helps you learn them and is easy, user-friendly, I would say. Sure. Yeah, any of those work. I actually do it myself this time of the year. I'll queue up songs and call notes and flight notes of all the different birds I'm going to be seeing in that little window we get before they head north. Just to practice. It's one good way to get yourself ready and get familiar with some of the birds you're going to be seeing. Yeah, I do it like every night, but. I don't have a great horned owl recording on my phone, but a lot of the owls are pretty. Great horned owls are pretty common around here, and a lot of them are pretty responsive to playback. If you've ever gone, I talked about leading a walk sometime at night and doing it because it's really neat to see. I would probably do it in the winter, the fall, when they're more active. That's when the owls actually start pairing up and mating for the most part. Yeah, I know. There's been a great horned owl at the community garden, Cow Common Community Gardens along the river trail, but it's pretty hard to see. Yeah, they're surprisingly common. If you know what they sound like, I bet all of you have them in your neighborhood. I would guarantee it somewhere. Yeah, especially in winter, they'll use the same. Even if it's not a pair, they'll use the same roost site over and over. All the owls will do that. Yes. What? Dudley Pond and Coticha are kind of hit or miss. It's a little more, obviously the habitat's more fragmented than it is in the town. That's where I grew up in South Wayland, and you just have to be a lot more diligent. Pod Meadow was probably the best area to see birds in the south part of town. Pod Meadow Conservation Area, if any of you know where that is. Yeah, Pod Meadow actually has a sign that we bought from the town. Do you know the address off the top of your head? And there is a park. I think it's probably about 7, 9 foot sign that's chestnut brown and has vertically down. It says Pod Meadow in big white letters that are like this big. Yeah. The other kind of, yes. It's a good walk too, and if you go to our town website, I have more detailed maps and directions with like 0.1 miles, 300 feet to actually how far the different intersections are and where stuff is. You asked about South Wayland. If you're real vigilant in fall through early winter, you can get a surprising number of waterfowl there. Yeah, sure. Great blue herons around. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure, of course. I think two things are probably at play here. The first one is probably observation, just how active somebody is. No? Sometimes people just notice if they're out more, they tend to see more. The other option I would say is you can certainly landscape for birds. I. Whew. And you said you're seeing more now in the last 5 years. Sure. Oh. It sounds like you have house sparrows. Is that possible? Nested, right? Yeah, it sounds like what you might have is there's a little bird they were brought over here from Europe. They're called house sparrows, and they will nest in crevices and holes, and they do especially like house air conditioners. I bet you that I would be willing to bet anything that's what you're hearing. And for whatever reason, they just found your house. They're very active. They're very noisy. They're very conspicuous. And once they find a nesting spot, they can nest sometimes in small. I mean, if you didn't want the house sparrows there, if you took down the air conditioner, they would move on. Yeah, I would bet you anything that's what you're saying. Yeah,
You mentioned the giant robin migration.
sure.
Years ago, I lived in Wayland for about 30 years. Years ago, once a year would be, I'm right across from migration. I have tall oak trees. I was at the edge of a field, really tall oak trees, and the migration would stop at my house. I would hear this incredible noise. I would walk out of my house and my oak trees were filled. I thought they were starlings. They're way up there. I can't see them, but the wing shape is similar to starlings. Is that the
Month is it?
what?
What month is it? You're seeing them? Grackles. Yeah, a pretty common feature around here in September through early November is the common grackles. Sometimes you get it, I get this question a lot. 400, 500, 600 deep will just move through people's yards. They're looking for acorns, usually.
The end of the year because they were heading
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yep.
huge noise, and then they'd all pick up.
And then,
The other thing that I saw that I haven't seen in a long time is that they used to follow the, well, not commuting anymore, but they used to follow the 128, and you'd see them, big migrations going right through the interchange where the Pike and 128 come together.
yeah, grackles will, they're probably almost certainly going to a roost.
Off and landing, they were doing they were really flocking together and
Oh,
in the sky.
starlings is what you're seeing, balling together. Murmuration. Yes, very good.
And I haven't seen that in a while, but I can believe they're grackles. They look pretty large.
Yeah, that's pretty common that time of the year for grackles to move through people's yards in huge, huge numbers like that.
Yeah, well, is there anything you can say to make me like grackles?
They're good.
They socialize so poorly, they scare away all the other birds, and they're just annoying.
They're a good bird in like January. I like seeing them in January at the end of the year when there's nothing else around. But when they're here in March through early November, they can be. When they're here, they're here. They're omnipresent.
Direct the enjoyment of watching the feeder, and what I wind up doing is I take down the could land on, right? This is an air feeder and but the grackles are smart. They put their feet right up inside through the hole, and if then the weight doesn't go down, and it's the only bird that does that. And so what I do in the middle of the summer is I take that feeder down and leave only my finch feeder, which
Right.
they can't use. And they do seem like crows. They seem to come at the same. They hunt in packs, and they seem to come at the same time every day. And if you take down the feeder for 2 weeks, they will forget about you, and you can put the feeder back up, and you won't see them for a couple more weeks. You can sort of go off and on like that. And
Yeah, try putting them a little closer to your house. Grackles are a little more skittish than some of the other birds you probably want to see.
I get red wings.
Yeah, I mean, they are what they are.
If I put a platform in the way in the back of my property, that'll attract everything, right?
Yeah, but it'll probably that would probably be the worst, even worse, because then you're not offering any resistance to them at that point.
2 feet from my house.
They do build the feeders with the cages where the holes are only like that big.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that for the summer. My feeling is, out of no expertise at all, my feeling is that in the spring through March and April, I let it go. I feed them, I feed everything, but as we get on into the summer when there's other food sources available and so on, I want to discourage. Are you continuing to fill the feeders through the summer at Meadow, or are you filling that just with bears or anything else?
Oh, that would be nice. Wouldn't mind seeing a bear. It's like one of the only animals I haven't seen in Wayland yet. But I haven't seen. I'll keep feeding them as long as there's interest. I try to do it like once or twice a week, and then when they're drained, they're drained. And when my next work week starts, I usually go out back and I'll throw a whole bag of seed in there. Yes. I have one coming up in June. I don't know the date yet. It's part of Riverfest. I think that's. I should know. That's either. I don't know who it is, who's in charge of it, but we'll have stuff up on our website. I'll send it to the crier. I'll put flyers up at some of the, herds. I put them up at the gardens. I'll put them up at Cow Common. Some of them. I could probably put one up here at the library. You can always email me. I'm on obviously the town email. Just say you got anything going on. If there was interest, like I said, I would love to do more of them. It's just so hit or miss. We have one coming up It's August 20th something. That's a nighthawk walk. I told some of you that's a good one because there's a lot more birds. There's always something to see on that one. And usually they're pretty cooperative, but even when there aren't nighthawks, there's usually plenty of herons and shorebirds and sometimes egrets, hawks. We've had owls, eagles, ospreys that time. There's always stuff to see. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't. If there's more interest, I'd be happy to do. I'd definitely do more. I just never know. I've had as many as 40 people and as few as 0, without any rhyme or reason. I don't. Yeah. From yesterday, what's it? 20. Was it next Tuesday? But I think that's because my department, the conservation department in Sudbury Valley, purchased that piece of land. We're kind of co-leading the walk, but they have a limit on it. I would suggest calling them tomorrow. Last time I knew it was like 10 to 15 people, and they had maybe. I know it wasn't full. How about that? They take the. You'd have to call them. I'm sorry, Sudbury Valley Trustees. Thank you. Yeah, there was talk at the last Woodcock Walk of this winter doing an owl walk too, which would probably be, I think a lot of people would really enjoy, and they're really cooperative in the winter. It's a lot of fun, but that would probably be, we don't charge our department, the conservation department. It's just like the Nighthawk Walk in August. It's as many people can come as they as want. But the owl one I'd probably limit just because it's almost all auditory unless you get really lucky and one happens to land in front of you. I think the experience would be better with the fewer people that came. But if there was enough interest, I'd be more than happy to run multiple nights. But yeah, so we have, like I said, we have one. I'm co-leading a walk with Sudbury Valley Tuesday, and then Riverfest, which I don't know the dates on, but I know it's June. It's the weekend after Father's Day. I do know that. I could get the exact date if you want. I think I'm almost certain it's the Saturday after Father's Day, with Sunday being the rain date. And I haven't heard back from them yet, but yeah, for whatever reason, if they don't want me, I'd be happy to lead one, just to walk that day too. Yeah, that should be, I think it'll probably be around, I'm gunning for like 8 or 9 in the morning. Just do some birds and butterflies, something like that. Because by that time in June in Wayland, it's just the permanent residents. So, It'll be whatever we see. There'll be no specific target. And then, is that, yes, that's what I thought it is, it's the 22nd. I'm just waiting to hear back from them. Our new administrative assistant was on top of that. I don't know any other details from that other than he said, they asked if I wanted to do something, and I said I would. So I assume we'll hear back from them. He was the contact on that. Great question. The idea is to put it on somewhere that, any one of our properties that has river view. So it would pretty much be limited to herds or cow common. Cow common is probably easier for us too, because as I explained at my last walk, parking can be a really serious issue at herd farm. Greenways. It's owned by Sudbury Valley and the Conservation Department. I don't get down there too much because I just kind of stayed tight to this place I'm familiar with. And when I was growing up here, because as y'all heard, I graduated in 2000. There was no greenways, right? Like, when was that purchased? After 2000. Was it really? I don't remember it being open to the public then. So I'm not super familiar with the area, but you should, in theory, be able to see a lot of the same birds at greenways as you do at cow common and sedge meadow and herds. I just chose those ones because I'm familiar with them, and I can vouch for them being really prolific birding areas. But I'm not super familiar with it, other than I go there to mow trails and do chainsaw work. I've never birded it. Yeah, we've. Yeah, if you ever see any bald eagles around the summertime, this time of year through June, July, just shoot us an email. I'd follow up on it in my own time and throw in a canoe or something just to see. They've got to be here. A couple of years ago, John and I it was early August at Herd Pond on Pelham Island Road. So I wouldn't surprise me if in the Sudbury Wayland area there was a nest somewhere on private property that people just aren't seeing. We're hopeful. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible just how common they've come, bald eagles have become with little conservation and preservation. When I grew up, my dad used to take me out to the Quabbin Reservoir to see them, and now I can, right, because they bring the roadkills out to help the overwintering populations, and now, right. Now I'm shocked when I don't see one in Wayland, especially in February, March, early April, and then again in November, December. Throughout the winter, they can be kind of common if you're just active enough. Not with any predictability in town. I mean, I've had them all over. I've had them in Contituate quite a few times. I've had them at Dudley Pond. There was one at Dudley Pond a couple of years ago for quite a while, all the way through like May, even maybe June. I had them. There's just nowhere I can go to tell you and say you're definitely going to see one if you go here. I mean, we could probably all go out this weekend and do an informal hawk watch somewhere and see one. They've become that reliable in town now. You know, I got a ton of people, friends and family, that say I got to start doing something with them, but I really should. So many people nowadays are making money with photographs, but I just never got into it. Some of these, the winter wrens are a little bit difficult to photograph, but some of the others in there were, cooperative enough to set up. But winter wrens, again, the one the far left, top left, they're so active that it's really hard. I mean, I think I took that down in Chatham, maybe, and I think probably took me like 15 minutes just to get its picture. They just hop around endlessly, kind of like the chickadees do in your yard, same idea. So you just got to be patient and stay with it. And eventually, you can get one to come out in the open, and then you got to actually hope that the picture comes out when you get it. But no, I don't. Yep, go ahead. I think that's if I had the money, I would feed them. I know people that have fed live. You can order them live, but even the dead ones, they'll go so quickly that. And I know bluebirds will eat them too, but I think it's expensive. I would do it though. Why not? They love them, and everything will eat them. Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, they love them. Yep. Yeah, peanuts too, if you were interested in attracting bluebirds. That's another question I get a lot. I should have put it up there, but they're real hard to get. It's kind of one of those birds, you either have them or you don't. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right. But yeah, mealworms are good, and like I said, if you are lucky enough to get a vagrant, as John was talking about, which is kind of more advanced birding, but I'll answer your question if you want. But some birds that do get stuck here from the south or points southwest where it's warm are desperate for food, and those are birds that do need feed, feed all year round, or they'll probably succumb. But every once in a while, like John said in Cambridge a few years ago, he was just in this tiny little backyard with like one tree, for whatever reason, and it was eating mealworms all winter, and it actually survived. Without the feeder, it certainly wouldn't have, because it should have been down in Mexico, coming from the Pacific Northwest. Somehow ended up here. Just luck. Yes, Courtney. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, anybody else got anything?
Are owl boxes successful here? Barn owl houses, are they successful?
In Massachusetts, we only get barn owls as a fringe nester, and they're only found in Nantucket and Rhode Island, Nantucket and the Vineyard. So yeah, probably not. That'd be something. We do screech owls and barred owls. We use boxes. I'd never have tried to put them up. I can't speak on their success, but if you did, but they do sell owls boxes for saw-whet, northern saw-whet owl and eastern screech owl. And if you put them up somewhere safe, Usually in an area that gets a lot of sun during the day, you might get them roosting in the winter.
Drumlin Farms has a plan for an owl box that you can make out of a single plank of 1 by 10.
Yeah, we don't get barn owls around here.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.